The world of fiction is changing. At this point, the American comic book industry is getting its ass handed to it on a silver platter by Japanese manga. And it's not even a close fight. The American comic book industry shot itself in the leg, and now competition is rolling in and snatching up as much of the market as it can. But it ain't just manga that is taking over. There's also the independent sector that is alive and well right now. From westerns to science fiction to fantasy and adventure and all the way back around to superheroes, there are plenty of projects out there to fill your comic book needs. Enter Eric July and his passion project, the Rippaverse. Now this one has been the center of a lot of internet chatter and drama, with claims being thrown around left and right, both supporting and denigrating the series. Not the least of these claims being the potential Isom lawsuit over the acronym and the name of the character. Look, I was interested at first because of the legal aspect of it and the ramifications it could potentially have on stuff I want to do in the future. But at this point, I'm over it. Constant internet drama. Regardless of any controversy or drama, Eric July set up this series as a response to the sour turn of the stories he used to love. And the only question left now is whether or not the product is good. I won't be shy about the fact that I don't have a whole lot of experience with reading comics. I've been more of a manga guy for the longest period of time, and up until recently I hadn't touched comics until my adventure into the indie sector. And it entails a notably different style of storytelling. Manga tends to take on longer, more intricate stories with themes, whereas comics tend to tell stories that are much more condensed, shorter, and efficient. So where do we start? Isom number 1 opens up with some police chatter and a quick few hint drops about some upcoming character introductions, as well as insinuating that someone rather problematic has returned to the area. Then it launches into the main body of the story, where Avery Silman, a rancher living in Shadow Valley, Texas, gets a call from his sister asking him to look into the disappearance of a family friend. Feeling unable to refuse, Avery is quickly sucked back into the life of city conflicts he had hoped to get away from, and his meetup with his old friend Darren Fontano puts him at odds with the other man. A small skirmish then ensues, and Avery is thrown out of Darren's club, and the whole conflict becomes personal, as Avery feels he's been disrespected by Darren. But before he can do anything, he gets swept up in the ongoing battle between the mysterious Yaira and the police force's Alpha Corps, a team of superpowered cops that deal with the Excepts, or people with unnatural abilities. So Avery gets dropped from the sky onto a car by Yaira and then finds himself in the hospital, which means he then has to get himself picked up and reorganized before returning to the club for round 2 with Darren. Unfortunately, his forceful entry inspires another violent confrontation with San Juan, a hired mercenary working for Darren who threw him out of the building the last time. And that results in Avery having to flee from the cops before he gets a chance to confront Darren. Some notes here. Overall, I liked it. Was it perfect? No, not really, but that's going to get down to artistic preferences and the fact that this is the first entry into the series. The titular character, Isom, is far less of a noble hero than what you would expect from a series about superheroes, and he kind of admits that in the series, as he's motivated more by his personal beef with Darren, inspired by their confrontation, than in saving the family friend. Still, in spite of wanting out and being more motivated by his personal beef than the actual heroing, he demonstrates a willingness to get involved with some things he doesn't really want to touch for the sake of friends and family, and this is a repeated thing. No, he's not a perfect hero because he makes it a personal thing about his own ego, but his actions still do speak to some sort of heroic qualities within him. I think the series is pretty good at inspiring intrigue. First of all, there's Isom himself, whose powers and origins are not clearly defined yet, but his abilities seem to involve some sort of super strength and invulnerability, and he's able to plow the super strong Santuan straight through a brick wall, and survive being dropped from several stories up onto a car. Whatever his powers are, though, he's not entirely invincible because he does get hurt at several points throughout the series. Then there's a character who seems to teeter on the edge of being a supervillain, Yaira, and she has some serious beef with some powerful people in Floor's part. She intrigues me because the available information on the series suggests she's not only very powerful, but far older than her appearance would suggest. And since her intentions are clearly not noble, it makes for an interesting character to have around, so I'm interested in seeing where her story is going and how her involvement in this one is going to play out. And then we have the Alpha Corps, led by Brian Solari, who occupies a sort of Superman-esque position in this universe where he is a well-respected, noble hero character that people look up to for safety. He's accompanied by a few others who include Braxwell, the strong silent type, whose singular ability seems to be his ability to fly, and Ingrid Valdez, who has the ability to generate energy whips that she can entangle people with. The idea of these superhero cops kind of intrigues me because a lot of the stuff I grew up consuming was the more vigilante, independent type of heroes like Batman and Superman. Characters who didn't specifically work for the government and had their own agendas. So seeing this one where you have characters tied to a government body who are acting in the interest of the law is a bit of a new take to me, and I know there's probably stuff out there that's already been done like this, and it might not be the first thing. Nothing's new under the sun, I get it. And you can also make the argument that that's just My Hero Academia, but I don't want to get into the weeds on that one. For what it's worth, this comic doesn't devote a lot of time to divulging information about its characters. It prefers a much more show don't tell approach in letting you figure out what characters are aligned with what factions. And a lot of them are introduced as a bit of foreshadowing of the larger story at play. You're very much treated like you're a part of the universe, and it doesn't really try to explain at you everything that's going on. A lot of the mystery in the characters is preserved that way for speculation on the part of the fans, and I genuinely prefer that. It's like trying to theorize how a manga is going to play out and all, and I find that kind of thinking very fun. I do have my gripe about how this comic pretty much just unveiled a bunch of shiny new stuff and didn't really discuss much of it. It felt like a lot of dangling shiny objects, but nothing really substantial to go along with it. It was a tad disappointing, but I can honestly understand the play. For the sake of keeping the story clean of unnecessarily long-winded dialogue scenes about how things work, it opts to move the story along without that information while implying that it will be addressed at a later date. The story itself does a lot of setup for both the world and the power struggle going on down in the city of Flores Park as Darren tries to secure his seat as the top dog while the other players move in. And since this is the first story arc in the universe, I will give it a pass for a variety of reasons, the least of which being that it still needs to set up the rest of the universe. Now back to some small complaints. The Isom art style isn't exactly my thing. I don't really think that's a direct negative to the series, because I don't particularly think it's bad, but it's just not my preference. Like I said, I'm a manga and anime kind of guy, and highly stylized artwork is more my thing. But I never really had a huge problem with the artwork for Isom, especially since I don't have any other comics to compare it to. Still though, there are panels that try to convey something but feel a bit shallow or look whack in my opinion. And there are some issues I have with the dialogue feeling clunky or feeling like it needs a bit of a rework. I tried all sorts of intonations and ways of reading some of these spots, and some of them worked themselves out, others I just couldn't find a good way to get through it. And I ended up just sort of rewording them in my head, trying to preserve the same meaning behind them, while making it more clear and better in sentence structure. And while I did have a slight problem with that, it got better in the second book, which brings us to Isom number 2. Continuing from where the last part of Avery's story left off, we get an explanation as to why Isom quit being a hero, as well as an introduction to his new suit. So he returns to the ranch and is ambushed and has to take another detour on his quest to get some respect on his name, as he has to look into some supernatural occurrences that lead him to meet Sydney Bloodruth, as well as facing off against some otherworldly monsters. Now somewhere in there he also gets his suit after it's fully repaired and revamped, and we get to finally see Avery put his suit on for the first time. Now, because this book hasn't been out for a year and I don't really want to get into a lot of spoilers, I'm going to start talking in vaguer detail. The book builds more on the amount of power Darren has on the city, as well as insinuating he's in bed with some rather nasty characters. It also gives hints as to Isom's powers and redeems his character a bit from the spiteful kind of person he was in the first book, as he proves his willingness to run deep into danger for the sake of those close to him. It did take a sort of odd, unexpected supernatural turn, but with one part of the story still outstanding, I am going to reserve judgment on that until I get the full picture. And again, there are some times where the dialogue feels clunky, and even after reading through twice, I still couldn't sort out how to make it flow well in my mind. No, it's really not as bad as the first book, and the artwork isn't something that particularly strikes my fancy either. So, yes, the Rippaverse has my interest. Is it the most perfect, impactful thing that I've ever read? No, not by a long shot. But is it something that intrigues me creatively? Yes. No, it's not perfect and it has its problems, but it's still something that I see potential in. And my impactful storytelling critique only goes so far once you consider that not every story has to be about some big, deep meaning. Some really great works of fiction have some really simple and really shallow stories to tell. And the story hasn't had its time yet to really get its big moments like Batman and Superman did for me. Expecting the refined excellence of the Batman the Animated Series out of this right out the box is a bit unfair, so I'm going to pull back because that's a harsh criticism. The thing about Batman and Superman and a lot of these popular characters is they have legacies that predate when a lot of us were born. They've been around for quite a long time, and they've had a chance to establish a good track record and even had a chance to produce some absolutely awful blunders. The Rippaverse has yet to fully build up that kind of a reputation and a run. So the jury's still out as to whether it's going to be as great as something like the Marvel or DC Universe. I can, though, say that I do enjoy these two comic books. They're entertaining, and I will continue to buy more. I look forward to the conclusion of this arc, as well as some of the other entries that have already been announced for the Rippaverse. I think it started in a good place and is building towards something bigger. It is a very ambitious project, and whatever its end goal is, whatever its big plan is, we still know almost nothing about it. It would be like trying to judge the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe by just watching Captain America. I'm going to give this series a 7 out of 10 so far, because it hasn't quite given me anything to latch onto like I did with the Justice League, but it's a solid footing for his whole universe that he wants to build. It's introduced characters that I'm genuinely interested in, and it has a world that has me a bit intrigued. I haven't particularly found anything incredibly negative that would make me recoil away from this series, so I will continue to invest money and time in it. And on top of that, the company is committed to keeping its universe intact, with its own written code of ethics committing to making the universe as fan-friendly as possible. This comes with a promise to absolutely minimize reboots and retcons, as well as making sure every volume of a comic you buy matters to the whole universe. But that's about all out of me, so thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this video, please like and consider subscribing because I do appreciate the support. You can check out any of my other videos where I talk about comics, books, and anime, and I will catch you later. See ya.